The tide hadn't even turned before I saw their skiffs cutting through the reeds. 2 boats, flat-hulled, engines throttled low so the herons wouldn't scatter and give them away. I counted 4 men. I'd been awake since the gate alarm chirped at first light, standing on the porch with a cup of chicory going cold in my hand, and I didn't move when I saw them. Didn't reach for the rifle on the rack inside the door either. Wasn't time for that yet. I whistled 2 notes low. The marsh went still, not quiet still, which is a different thing entirely. Somewhere under the green scum and the cordgrass, 6 tons of wick uncurled like he'd been waiting all night for exactly this. He surfaced 30 yards out, slow, the way he always did when I called him in daylight instead of for hunting. Just his ridged spine breaking the water first, then the long wedge of his skull, water sheeting off scales the color of wet bark. Big enough now that, when he stood in the shallows, the water line barely reached his second set of knees. I'd hatched him out of a leathery egg the size of a feed sack 6 years back, after a flash flood washed a clutch of them up against my dock and left every other one cracked and cold. He was the only one that lived. I fed him eel guts off a stick for 8 months before he trusted my hand near his mouth. He didn't trust easy, he just trusted me. Other folks on the marsh kept their distance from him still, even 6 years on. The river traders gave my dock a wide berth when they could, and the schoolboat that picked Myra up twice a week always idled an extra 10 yards out until somebody confirmed Wick was sleeping. I never minded that. A 6-ton predator earns caution the same way a loaded gun does, whether or not it's pointed at you. What I minded was the assumption underneath it, that a thing built like that couldn't also be gentle, that the two didn't fit in the same animal. Myra never had that problem. She'd grown up with him the way other kids grow up with a dog that's too big for the house, and it never once occurred to her to be careful around him. That was the part the river traders couldn't get their heads around, and the part Dasson's crew was about to learn the hard way. The skiffs grounded on the mudflat below the tide gate, my tide gate, the one my father had built and I had rebuilt twice, and 4 men climbed out like they owned the silt under their boots. The one in front had a surveyor's slate under his arm and a sidearm on his hip he wanted me to notice. Joran Cal, he didn't wait for me to answer. Saltmark compacts reassigning this gate. Riparian default, 3 seasons unpaid. He held the slate up like it meant something out here, where the nearest magistrate was 4 days upriver and everybody knew it. You've got till noon to clear your gear. I knew the gate wasn't in default. I'd filed the water rights renewal myself in person 11 months back. This wasn't a compact crew. This was 4 men with a slate they'd typed themselves and a story they figured a marsh farmer wouldn't have the paper to fight. That's a long walk for a forged form, I said. The leader, Dasson, I'd learn later, smiled like I'd confirmed something for him. He glanced past me at the shape still standing chest-deep behind my dock, water running off scaled shoulders the size of a barn door, and didn't even flinch. Didn't figure you'd have a pet that size and still be this stupid, he said. Leash on him. No. Then maybe he eats you instead of us. That's when Myra came out onto the porch in her sleep shirt, barefoot, hair a wreck, carrying the net basket like she always did at first light because hauling crab pots before school was just what we did. She didn't look at the strangers first. She looked at Wick. Morning, Wick, she held up the basket. You're on rope duty. Wick's head swung toward her, slow as a tide turning, and the menace went out of him like someone had pulled a plug. He waded in, lowered his long skull, and let her loop the net rope over the bony ridge behind his jaw, the same spot she'd looped it 100 mornings before, ever since she was 7, and decided a 600-pound hatchling counted as crew. She still called it that. Counts as kin, she'd announced once, dead serious, after he hauled the whole net line in without being asked because she'd had a fever and couldn't get up. The name stuck around the house. Wasn't doctrine. Wasn't anything but a kid's rule that turned out to be true. Dasson's grin slipped just at the edges. Get the kid inside, he told me. This doesn't need to get complicated. She's getting the pots, I said. We do this every morning, you're welcome to wait. One of the others, younger, jumpy, decided waiting wasn't his style. He came around the dock fast, hand on his own sidearm, and grabbed for Myra's arm to pull her off the gate planking, not gentle about it, the kind of grab that leaves a mark. I didn't shout, I didn't have to. Easy, Wick, I said, just that. The same 2 words I used when he startled at thunder. It wasn't easy that followed. Wick came across that gate the way the tide comes across a sandbar, no warning, no build-up, just suddenly there. The young one's hand never made it to the holster. Wick's tail caught the skiff broadside and folded it into the shallows like wet paper. The man went down with it, into mud up to his chest, more startled than hurt, which was exactly how I'd raised him to do it. Wick didn't bite. He'd never bitten a person in his life. He just put one webbed forefoot, the size of a serving platter, flat on the man's sternum and held him there in 8 inches of marsh water, patient as a held breath, while he looked up at Dassin with the same flat amber eyes he used on me when he wanted to know if a job was done yet. Dassin had his sidearm half clear of the holster. He looked at 6 tons of patient amber-eyed animal with a clear shot at the meat of his throat, looked at me standing easy with my arms crossed and no weapon drawn at all, and did the math anybody with sense does eventually. He put his hands up first. Then he put them down on his head, which is a thing I noticed men do when they want a predator to see empty palms. Called him off. He's already off, I said. He's just making sure your boy stays polite till you're back in your boat. Dassin kept his eyes on Wick the whole time he backed toward the second skiff, the way a man backs away from a held grenade rather than a dog. I watched something shift in his face once he was clear of the planking, not relief. Not yet. Just the slow understanding that he'd come into this marsh with the wrong map. He'd priced me as an easy claim because the house was small, and the gear was old, and there was no compact insignia on my fence line to warn him off. Nobody had told him to check what was sleeping under the water before he made his offer. It took them 11 minutes to load both skiffs and clear the gate channel, the young one dripping silt the whole way. Dassin's slate left floating face down in the shallows where Wick had backed off, and let them go without another mark on any of them. I fished the slate out after, mostly to read the forged compact seal up close and laugh once, short, before I let it sink again. I never reported it. Didn't need to. Word travels faster on a marsh than any magistrate does, and by the time the real compact surveyor came through that fall to confirm my renewal was on file and always had been. Every claim jumper crew on 3 rivers already knew which Tidegate had a 6-ton lizard that counted the farmer's daughter as crew and didn't appreciate visitors who forgot their manners. That evening Myra set 3 plates at the table the way she always had, even though only 2 of us sat at it. The third went on the porch step, where Wick folded himself down, 400 more pounds of him than the year before, head taller than the porch rail now, taller than the barn roof when he stood full up, and waited, patient as ever, until she carried his plate out to him. He knelt for it, always had, ever since he was small enough to fit across my lap, lowered that great ridged skull below the level of her shoulder, let her set the plate down between his forefeet, and didn't touch a bite of it until she said his name. Go on, Wick. I sat on the step beside her and watched 6 tons of apex predator wait on a 9-year-old's permission to eat fish heads off a tin plate, and thought about the cracked eggshell I'd buried by the dock 6 years back, and the 5 siblings that never got the chance he had. He'd grown into something that could fold a skiff in half without trying. He still knelt for supper. Some things you raise right just don't change, no matter how big they get.